Hi, welcome back to Vote for Vermont. I'm your host today, Ben Kinsley, and we also have our regular host, Pat McDonald, here today.
Hello, Ben.
Hello. And we've also got Josh Unruh, who's been on the show a couple times talking about the sale of Vermont Yankee. He's the select board chair from Vernon. Josh, thank you for being on.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I
Yes,
appreciate
welcome.
it very much.
Glad you're back.
Good to be
This
here
is
again.
exciting.
Awesome. So we always ask people to talk a little bit about themselves. So, feel free to tell our viewers a little bit about who you are and what your role is as chair of the select board in Vernon.
So I've been the select board chair for about 2 years in the town of Vernon. I've been on the select board for about 3.5 years. I came in midterm with somebody. I'm also the assistant emergency management director, the president of the rec department. I hold various titles in the town of Vernon, and that keeps me very busy.
Lots of hats.
Absolutely.
They got your name.
Yeah, and just slowly added things
New
to it.
volunteer.
Oh,
in
we
town.
need someone to do this.
Exactly.
Call.
Jack of all trades.
Exactly.
So tonight we're talking about the sale of Vermont Yankee, or Entergy, to North Star as of October 11th. That's when the NRC
Yes.
put their, but it's not final yet because we've got one more step to go. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
That's correct. It's still got to go through the Public Utility Commission, through the state. They kind of held off on making their decision until they heard what the NRC wanted to do. And so that's kind of the holding pattern that we're in right now, is to get a decision from the PUC.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. So the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, confirmed that North Star met the regulatory, legal, and technical and financial requirements necessary to qualify them for the license to sell, or to purchase, sorry.
Correct.
License to purchase, which was a significant hurdle because I think the state was kind of waiting on that decision from the NRC in order to proceed with their own permitting process, correct?
Absolutely.
So what was the real significance of that ruling? I know that this has been kind of an evolving process over the last 18 to 24 months. Like, what is this hurdle significance-wise?
It's huge for, I think, the state and for the town of Vernon,
Right.
that we have the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the federal guidelines, so to speak, for the nuclear industry, putting their stamp of approval on the sale. That's a huge hurdle for us to be over, and my hope is that the Public Utility Commission and the state level takes that into heavy consideration, that hurdle's done and over with.
Right. So the NRC is kind of the one that federally watches over or approves and regulates all nuclear power plants, all that stuff.
Exactly.
Before I ask you my next question, we've said sale of, and we've said licensees. So is it
Sure.
is it an actual sale of Entergy to North Star, or is it the transfer of the lease? Do you know what the official? I was getting confused reading the articles. One said sale, others said a lease. There'll be the lessee.
It's an actual sale, so North Star will own all the property and the trust fund as well.
Okay, but I guess part of that is to get the okay from the NRC, which is a lease of some kind. But I don't know what they're leasing. They're not really lessee because they are owning it.
Exactly. They will own the property.
Very confusing.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So when
If this was easy, it wouldn't have taken
exactly.
18 months to figure it out.
We'll just call it sale and
Yes.
move on. But in Digger, of course, they said, there's a big article that said our state officials, after the NRC said yes, they were expressing serious doubts about the sale, and I was very surprised. They were particularly concerned, as Ben mentioned, about the finances. I mean, they were at all the meetings, the state. We went to one. You went to a couple of them, didn't you?
Yeah, I've been to a few of them, yeah.
I mean, what else is there to say? Why are they concerned? Or who's concerned?
I think most of the concerns were prior to the NRC's approval, and then going through the MOU process, the Memorandum of Understanding process, has kind of taken everybody's concerns, whether they're health concerns or safety concerns or financial concerns. All of those are addressed through that Memorandum of Understanding. And with the NRC's approval on top of it, I really don't know what else there is to complain about.
And I think it's mostly the Conservation Law Foundation
Correct.
who's really raising the most concerns right now.
Yeah, they've been the only intervener throughout the whole process that has kind of, you know, said no to just about everything, regardless of what's out there for, you know, knowledge of the health and safety aspect of the decommissioning and the financial side of it.
You would think they'd be happy about this because they, you know, Yankee shut down, so that was one of their big concerns was, and now this is going to turn, as we'll talk about a little bit later, something pretty positive for you.
Oh, absolutely.
And for, you know, the whole area down there.
Yeah, it's going to be very good for the whole region and the state.
Yeah.
Let's back up just a little bit.
Sure.
You mentioned the MOU process. Many of our viewers probably don't know what the MOU process is and what that looks like. So the Memorandum of Understanding is basically an agreement that Entergy and North Star enter into with the state about how this deal is going to go forward, what the requirements are going to be. What kind of process was that and what stakeholders came into play?
So the process was extremely long. I think we're about just over a year into that particular process. I think it started late last year, could have even been earlier before I got involved. But every state agency that you can think of, Agency of Natural Resources, anybody essentially that wanted to be an intervener in the process, have their say, was allowed in. So CLF, the Conservation Law Foundation, NEC, both very anti-nuclear groups. The town of Vernon was obviously an intervener. We put our name in the hat as soon as it came available, and because obviously this is a very important process for us, and we wanted to make sure that everything that was done safely for the town, and that there would be no, you know, financial shortfall in the end, and we were left with half a power plant. So, you know, everyone that wanted to be involved in that process was involved. And as I mentioned earlier, CLF was the one and only intervener at the end of that process that still had questions, comments, concerns out of all the state officials, agencies, and interveners in the process.
Yeah, because on the public hearing we went to, you just had to sign up. They didn't put, you know, who you are or why you're there. You just signed up and talked.
And I mean, for Vernon in particular, you know, you got a public waterway there, so you definitely have a vested interest in, you know, making sure that the site's cleaned up. There's a public middle school, I think. Is it a middle school?
Elementary school.
Elementary school right across the street.
Yep.
Which I know was a piece of contention among a couple different groups.
I have 3 little girls that go to that school every day.
Exactly. So you've got even personal invested interest in making sure that the site is decommissioned properly. And I know one of the debates early on was about the concrete that was there, and whether or not they were going to use that to infill, like some of the basements and the outlying buildings, or if they were going to try to truck it off site. And the town, I think, didn't want them to truck it off site because of all that truck traffic going past the school, right?
Yeah, exactly. There was some concern about the contamination of the concrete, and you know, depending on where it was within the site, we were totally okay with it being used as fill because there wasn't any more contamination than, you know, what's in the walls of this building, from natural radiation. So there was no concern on the town's end in that respect. But yeah, we were very concerned about truck traffic and, you know, our road conditions after the decommissioning process and all that kind of thing. And North Star has reopened a railroad spur that was originally started for when Vermont Yankee was built. So they're going to be utilizing the railroad a lot to remove stuff during the decommissioning process to kind of mitigate our road issues.
Gotcha. So the last hearing, the last public hearing, the governor submitted a letter that stated his support for the sale of the plant. So I think, you know, there was a lot of people that were surprised to the number of objections that came forward after that, after all these state agencies had kind of weighed in, as you said, and then, you know, even from, you know, the governor, to the point the governor had weighed in support of the sale. You know, I think we talked about some of the outliers, but what are the outliers and what are their concerns?
Really, the major concern that keeps getting brought up is the financial aspect. Is, do they have enough money? Do they have enough backing to, you know, complete the process if that trust fund runs dry? That's been a major concern right along. The health and safety concerns have kind of, you know, slowly gone away, but that financial
Well,
concern.
they've made some positive commitments to where the funding's coming
huge.
from.
Huge.
You know, I'm sort of skipping ahead, but they've put this project into 900 components, each with its own budget, and I think they've promised that if they go over, they're going to take it out of their own money, not the decommissioning fund. So, is that correct? Did I say that correctly? You're sort of
Yes,
smiling.
I guess the concern is that do they have enough money in their own coffers if.
But isn't that easily proven? I mean, just
Yes.
to put in your
Well,
It is.
At
your
the
balance accounts and whatever you use every year for income tax or something.
And I get the concern of like, oh, they're going to run out of funding, but the reality is, you know, if they run out of where they are going to make their money is off of the fund, right?
Yes.
If they don't decommission the plant safely with the available resources from the fund, they don't make any money. In fact, they lose money. So they're all the incentive in the world to do it under the constraints that they have.
Right.
Yeah, and
so
that's where
that funding is theirs, period.
Well, that's where the 900 compartments kind of
Right.
come into play. It's kind of like if you and I get work done on our house and we want to do the kitchen and then we want to do the bathroom and then we want to do the living room, and we tell our contractor, okay, when you get the kitchen done, you get your paycheck.
Right.
When you get the bathroom done, you get that paycheck. When you get the living room done, you get that paycheck, which is a very common process in construction or contracting in general.
Piecemeal sort of thing.
And that's the same way that North Star has this set up and has had it set up from the beginning.
Oh,
so
I see. So as they're doing the 900, they're getting paid.
every step has a dollar value attached to it, and that trust fund doesn't release that dollar value to North Star until that step is complete. And that's the way it's been since the beginning. So we've really had no concern on the financial end of it, knowing that from the beginning that that's the way this process is going to work, that they can't get any money until those steps are
Now,
completed.
have they done a similar project somewhere else in the United States? I mean, do they have a track record in doing this, or is this sort of new to them?
This is new to everybody. I mean, this is the first merchant plant that's ever been, you know, fully decommissioned.
Oh, really?
So it's been done. Plant decommissioning has been done. A merchant plant has never been done. They've done all kinds of different reactors and different pieces of a nuclear power plant, meaning North Star, but they've never done a complete one from beginning to end. They've never owned one.
So the eyes of the world are on us, eh?
Absolutely, and it's a huge market right now. There's several businesses, Holtec Industries being one of them, that are trying to break into this, because as more and more of our nuclear power plants get shut down and age, this decommissioning it's a new business line for many people, including North Star, and this is their kind of first go round at it. So you would think, and I believe, that you do the best possible job that you can do with this first one to ensure future work down the road.
Now, who's monitoring them who is monitoring them on a daily basis? Is the NRC going to oversee
Absolutely.
it?
The
And I'm
NRC
sure the
will.
state's going to be in there.
Absolutely. The NRC will stay on top of it throughout the entire time, and so will the state. I have no doubt.
So one question I have is, so during the MOU process and then the process that it's going to have to go through now that the NRC has signed off, who got to sign the MOU from the state's perspective, right? Because the MOU is between North Star, VY, and the state. So who gets to sign off on the MOU from the state's perspective?
I actually don't know the answer to that question. I don't know who's John Hancock actually goes on the bottom of that MOU. I really don't know the answer.
I don't know if
to
it would
that.
be like the Commissioner of Natural Resources or Public Safety.
There's so many
or something.
agencies involved, maybe even the governor.
It very well could be the governor. I really don't know.
He oversees all of them because there's so many. You said natural resources. There's just so many entities that are
You'd almost think
involved.
it'd be maybe the Agency of Human Services, because a lot of like the Public Safety and
I don't
Department of
know.
Health are all under Human Services. So I
Yeah,
don't know.
that's a great question. I'm going to find out the answer
Yeah,
to,
I'm
just
curious.
because I don't know.
We'll put that on the website.
Yeah, we'll find that one.
after
We'll
the
find that
show.
one out for you.
P.S.
Cool. So tell us why the sale is so important for Vernon and really all of southeast Vermont. Like, why is that such a critical piece of the economy for for that part of the state?
For us, it's about redevelopment and kind of reestablishing a tax base that we lost. We lost a significant amount of tax revenue when Vermont Yankee closed. We've seen about a 20% increase in our municipal tax rate, despite cutting our municipal budget by about 20%. So that's really, you know, the impetus behind us wanting to, you know, get this sale done, get the decommissioning done safely and efficiently, and look at redeveloping that site to, you know, become a useful piece of property to the state, to the region, and to the town.
What's the size of the land that we're talking about here? It's pretty big, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fairly large. There will be part of the area where the spent fuel sits, and you know, a setback from that spent fuel that you can't get near. But there is plenty of land to do redeveloping.
And right on the water.
Right
it's
on the
a
river.
beautiful spot, actually.
It is. It is a very nice
for
spot.
redevelopment.
And is there any thought at this point about what's going to go into that space? Sounds like it probably has to be an industrial facility of some kind. I heard renewable energy was one of the options on the table, but
yeah, there's been several things that have been talked about, and we've just been kind of watching and waiting to see where the sale goes.
Right.
You know, we're really kind of looking at a mixed use of industrial, maybe some recreation, even with it being so close to the river.
Right.
There's so many different options that we can utilize that piece of land for, and we really don't want to, you know, pigeonhole anything specific, and kind of keep our options open for a mixed use.
When you were here, and also somebody from the Vernon offices,
Yep.
this young lady that was here with us, she was great. But I think you were having public hearings about what would you like to see. You've been including the residents of Vernon to ask them what they like.
Sure.
Right?
Yep. Yeah, we want to make sure that regardless of what we do with redevelopment, it stays kind of consistent with who we are as a town. I mean, we're a town that's been involved in energy production and agriculture for a very long time.
Right.
Our you know, our dam that we have just down the river from Entergy is 100 years old.
Wow.
So it's a huge part of our history, the energy side and the agricultural side. So we want to make sure whatever we do kind of sticks with.
You're looking to bring in jobs, because if I remember correctly, maybe I'm way off base, the average cost of the average salary was $105,000. Was that correct? That's average.
Yes. Yeah.
So there's some serious jobs you lost there.
Yeah, about 500 jobs, and with that average salary of about $100,000. So, you know, it wasn't just Vernon. It was, you know, state of Massachusetts, state of New Hampshire. All those folks lived within a geographic region. So it was felt everywhere.
Well, and there's the spillover to the small stores near the plant. For,
absolutely.
You know, the cafeteria, the restaurants, the just regular stores that people would go into on their lunchtime. It's a big impact.
Yeah, very big.
Yeah, it's crazy. Well, I'll definitely be watching to see how that turns out. I think, you know, it's always tough going through a development project like that. What's the horizon that you're looking at? I think was it 10 years or 20 years before the site would be cleaned up, even under the North Star plan? Even under the North Star plan, I think about 2030 is kind of the long view, and as early as 2026. So yeah, we have some time, but I think there's enough redevelopment there and enough land and enough planning that we're going to need all of that time to make sure that we're good to go when, you know, the land becomes available for redevelopment.
I read somewhere that the federal government is in charge of removing the spent fuel. Sorry.
Yes, but they don't have a long-term storage facility.
Yeah.
So that it's going to stay there until
yes.
Something opens up, or
yep. Yeah. So the Yucca Mountain project is obviously probably the newest failure in that attempt to find long-term storage. And I only say it's a failure not because it's not a viable site, but it just wasn't approved.
Right.
So yeah, I mean,
So
we're
if-
looking at holding on to that for the indefinite future.
But for the future, if other plants are aging out and need to be decommissioned, the federal government better get their act together and find a place.
Yeah, they're about
Yes.
to have a whole bunch of spent fuel rods that they don't know what to do with.
Right, exactly.
They'll all sit on ISFSI pads is the name of it.
What is that?
An ISFSI pad.
ISFSI.
They will all
Must
sit
stand
there.
for something.
Yeah, I knew the
ISFSI.
acronym at one
Yeah,
point,
that's
but now
okay.
I just call it an ISFSI
Yeah.
pad because it's easier.
Yeah.
But they'll all sit in their respective towns, right off the plants.
And those are basically just dry cast. They're big
Yeah, they're-
concrete cylinders.
They're
right?
massive concrete cylinders that will sit on a massive concrete pad surrounded by.
Oh, and you can see them.
Fence
They're up
and-
there on top of the ground.
Yep,
Oh, really?
they are above ground. Yep.
Okay.
So there's got to be security all around them as
Right.
well, and all of that actually falls on the back of the federal government to pay for because
That's a plus.
there's nowhere to put it because of
it's just
them,
their
so
fault.
they have to pay for it,
Excellent.
which means we all pay for it.
Eventually, yes, we do. Everybody always thinks federal dollars are free money. We should explain that's not the case.
No, definitely
So,
not.
Anyway,
So just kind of recap where we are today, right? So VY stopped producing power in 2014.
Correct.
You've gone through basically 2 years of this. First the MOU process, and now the NRC process to approve the buyer of the plant. That's basically 4 years now of, the plant's been sitting there, there's some stuff that Entergy has done to get it ready for decommissioning, but it's not actively being decommissioned currently, correct?
There are buildings being removed
Okay.
and, things like that they have license to do already. And North Stars actually has a crew that is doing some of that work as,
Great.
I would say, a subcontractor at this point since they don't own the property. They took over a little house that Entergy owns right outside of the school, actually, that you mentioned earlier, and there's a big North Star sign right out in front, and that's
Great.
kind of their office.
well, they've
so
moved in.
they've moved in. We actually have a few children in the elementary school of folks that work for North
nice.
Star already.
Great.
That tells me that North Star is very confident that they're going to see an approval. Otherwise, they're spending a lot of money for no reason.
Right.
Well, but I bet the people in
So.
Vernon are thrilled to death.
Yeah, I was
I'm
I
sure
was
it's like,
ecstatic
thank
when I saw
goodness.
the sign go out in front of that little
Right,
house that said
right.
North Star, understanding that they felt good enough to
That's great.
kind of stake claim in the town of Vernon.
So what's the schedule now? Is the Public Utility Commission has a schedule that says by December we'll start to make our decision, or?
I don't know that the state has any sort of schedule ever, but
Well said.
I think there's good intention.
Yeah.
A lot of times, the NRC was the same way. There was good intention deadlines, and they got moved forward and moved forward and moved forward until finally we had a decision. I think the Public Utility Commission is going to be the same way. Our hope at this point is that the closure of the sale happens in December of this year.
Right.
Paperwork signed, everything's done,
Yeah.
and we move on.
Because I didn't see that much press coverage of the NRC, and I was surprised about that because this is a big deal.
It is.
I mean, this has been around in all of our lives for quite a few years, and a lot of contention back and forth. And I think the MOU itself, when that got signed, that was a banner year. That was a banner moment where
Yes.
people came together and agreed on this thing.
And I think there's just kind of a public lack of knowledge of what these milestones mean in this process, because it's not a common thing that you and I sit around as Joe Public and watch a nuclear power plant get decommissioned in your backyard.
Right,
It's
right.
Yeah.
you have no idea unless you're involved in the process what all these steps mean and the hurdles that people from the town level to the state level to the federal level are going through in the amount of documents that have to be poured over to make these decisions. So
when you walk around town in Vernon, what are the things that people say to you? Like, what are the concerns they have, the hopes they have, the fears that they have? Like, what's What do people say to you about the sale of Vermont Yankee and the future of that site?
There's a lot of optimism in it.
Oh,
I don't know that I would use the word fear with anybody that I've ever spoken to. There was, concerns about our roadways, concerns about, traffic going past the school, all that kind of thing. But that was the majority of the concern.
That's great.
And there was no, outlying monster in the closet for anybody.
Well, I'm sure most of your residents were very comfortable with nuclear power anyway, because
The majority of them are, absolutely.
I'm sure they've been to every education opportunity that was there
Yeah.
from a public education perspective. So they're advanced from us anyway, because I think a lot of us don't know as much as they do about it.
Yeah, the plant's been around for 25 years. So
Right.
if you moved in the town of Vernon, you were very well aware that there was a nuclear power
Right.
plant in there,
Right.
and that you were okay with it,
Right.
and did your research before you purchased and all that kind of thing. And that's what we're finding now is, in those folks that have been there for longer than 25 years, we're part of the process of bringing it in.
Right.
So we have a very good comfort level with Entergy and with nuclear power as it stands. So
what happens to North Star now? They're down busy setting up there, and heaven forbid the Public Utility Commission either doesn't make their decision for a while or wants more information or something. That's just going to drag it out.
it will drag it out. The hope on everybody's radar is that doesn't happen.
Right, they just do.
That they'll take the lead from the NRC and that very positive movement that the NRC took and follow suit.
Right.
And has there been any indication from the governor that he's going to try to instill that in the Public Utility Commission, that sense of urgency, or is he kind of taking a hands-off approach?
It's really hard to answer. I mean, he's obviously busy campaigning right now,
Right.
as well.
But you've had a very close relationship with him during this whole time, right?
Yeah, he's always been supportive. I can't remember a time when he hasn't been supportive. And there came a time several months ago where I reached out to his office and said, listen, we need a letter directly from you, because the general public doesn't understand that when your department or your commission sends out a letter in support, that it's actually you.
Right.
And so I was up here several months ago, met with the governor in his office and said, hey, listen, we really need something with your name on it.
Right.
And that came out, I think it was,
Well, it was the last.
right
we were
around the
there.
time you guys were at an
we were there,
INDICAT
and
meeting.
it was all very exciting. Everybody said, "Ooh, we have a letter from the governor."
Yeah.
And everybody was pretty excited about it.
Yep. So that was a big step for us, was to get him to understand that we really need your name to it, so the general public understands that. And I think he's kind of carried that torch forward with us and been upfront with his belief that this is a good thing for the state and a good thing for the town of Vernon.
Cool. So is there anything else that we or our viewers should know about the Vermont Yankee decommissioning? Anything we haven't talked about to this point?
I think we've covered it pretty well. It's just a very exciting time for the town of Vernon to get the okay from the NRC, and we're very optimistic about the redevelopment of that site and what it will mean to the town, what it will mean to the region, and even the state. We want to put something back in there that's going to be a revenue producer for the state and for the town, and bring as many jobs as possible as we can as well.
Awesome. Well, Josh, thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate it.
And
Josh, we've covered this so often that when you have the ribbon cutting, we're coming down
exactly,
with
we'll do a
camera
show right
I would
there
love
at
it.
the
show
ribbon
right
cutting.
there.
Yeah,
We would love it.
Exactly.
Outside.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. Come back next week, and until then, keep listening beyond the sound bites.